Ready for a laughter riot? Watch a fast-talking lawyer struggle with the truth for one entire day, thanks to his son's magical wish. Honesty has never been so hilariously chaotic.
I guarantee you'll make partner. You're not busy tonight, are you?
Hey folks, Maya here. Heads up, there are spoilers ahead, so grab your snacks and let's dive into today's story. At the beginning of the story, we see a classroom of young children. Each child is sharing what their parents do for work. One boy says his mom is a teacher, but his dad is a liar. The teacher is startled, assuming the boy meant something else. The child then clarifies, explaining that his dad wears a suit, goes to court, and talks to a judge. Relieved, the teacher exclaims with a smile that his dad is a lawyer. Meanwhile, a cheerful and confident Fletcher steps out of the courthouse. He's just won another case and enthusiastically shares the news with everyone he meets. A woman rushes up to him, announcing that some journalists are eager to interview him. After adjusting his hair, Fletcher agrees to give them a few words. At the same time, a little boy and his mother sit on their porch. The boy eagerly watches every passing car, anxiously waiting for his father. The mother reassures her son that his dad is probably still tied up in court, but will arrive soon. Moments later, a car pulls up and Max excitedly runs to greet his father. After letting the boy and his dad play for a bit, the mother asks Fletcher why he's late again. Fletcher spins an elaborate story about how his car ran out of gas and a broken fuel gauge failed to warn him. Interrupting their bickering, Max happily announces that his dad is taking him to a wrestling match. The mother protests, calling wrestling too violent for her son. But Fletcher insists that Max needs to grow into a warrior. At that moment, another car arrives and Audrey's boyfriend, Jerry, steps out. Fletcher isn't thrilled to see him and makes sarcastic remarks to show it. Ignoring his behavior, Audrey tells Jerry she has more boxes for him. Fletcher seems surprised, having forgotten that Jerry is moving to Boston. Watching Jerry and Max play catch, Audrey looks on wistfully, knowing how much her son will miss him. Noticing her expression, Fletcher assures her that, unlike Jerry, he isn't going anywhere. He's staying close to Max. Fletcher then takes Max to his office. In one of the rooms, Miranda is talking to another lawyer who refuses to take on Mrs. Cole's case because he doesn't want to lie in court. After a moment's thought, Miranda decides to assign the case to someone else. At the same time, Fletcher and Max step off the elevator onto their floor. Fletcher greets everyone enthusiastically, throwing out compliments about their awkward hairstyles and odd appearances. Approaching his assistant, he learns that Max's birthday is tomorrow. Fletcher hurriedly sends his son into his office and frantically admits to his assistant that he completely forgot about it. She immediately pulls out a prepared gift from under her desk. She then updates Fletcher on various business calls and mentions that Miranda wants to see him. Fletcher adamantly refuses and jokingly suggests telling her he broke his leg. Just then, Miranda appears behind him. The assistant subtly signals that Miranda overheard everything. Turning around, Fletcher feigns enthusiasm and greets his boss warmly. Miranda informs him that she has a new case for him. Returning to his office with a mountain of papers and boxes, Fletcher finds Max waiting for him. Seeing the workload, Max realizes that their plans to spend time together aren't going to happen. Meanwhile, Jerry and Audrey are having dinner at a restaurant. Summoning his courage, Jerry proposes to her and asks her to move to Boston with him. He explains that he's thought long and hard about it and believes they're ready for this step. Completely caught off guard, Audrey is overwhelmed and speechless, unsure how to respond. That night, Fletcher spends hours buried in work. In the morning, as soon as Max wakes up, Fletcher greets him with a cheerful, "Happy birthday." In a playful gesture, he pulls a gift out from under his shirt and hands it to Max. Excited, Max tears open the box to find a baseball uniform inside. Thrilled, he asks his dad to play with him. But Fletcher promises they'll play after Max's birthday party. Right now, he has to work. Disappointed, Max leaves his father's office. Later, Audrey and Jerry arrive to pick up Max proudly. Max shows off his gift, and Jerry suggests they stop by a park on the way home to play. Taking Max to the car, Jerry leaves Audrey alone with Fletcher. She tells Fletcher they need to have an important conversation and suggests they do it at Max's birthday party. Fletcher agrees and says goodbye. Back at his office, Fletcher meets with Mrs. Cole. During the meeting, he assures her that they can win her case, even though she cheated on her husband 7 times. Fletcher argues that it doesn't justify leaving her without financial support. He lists several reasons why she's the real victim and convinces her that her husband's neglect drove her actions. Mrs. Cole starts to agree with him. Miranda, who has been observing the meeting, is impressed. She promises Fletcher that if he wins the case, he'll be made a partner at the firm. Then, out of nowhere, she makes a move on him, kissing him passionately and suggesting they become partners in more ways than one. At Audrey's house, Max's birthday party is in full swing. Jerry asks Audrey if she's thought about his proposal. She admits she has and gives him her answer, no. She explains that she can't separate Max from his father. Even though Fletcher doesn't spend much time with Max, their rare moments together bring him so much joy. If Fletcher and Max are 1,000 miles apart, they'll barely see each other, and Fletcher won't make the effort to visit. Just then, Audrey's phone rings. It's Fletcher calling to say that something has come up and he can't make it to the party. He promises, however, to pick Max up from school the next day. Audrey offers to let Max speak to him, but before she can hand over the phone, Miranda takes it from Fletcher and hangs up, insisting he stay focused on the romantic moment. Heartbroken, Max has brought his birthday cake with candles. The guests gather around, singing to him as Audrey gently encourages him to make a wish and blow out the candles as she kneels next to him. She explains that Fletcher couldn't come but feels terrible about it and promised to pick him up tomorrow. After a moment of thought, Max closes his eyes, makes his wish that for one day his dad can't lie, and blows out the candles. After an intense evening, Miranda tells Fletcher it was amazing and asks if he enjoyed it. Without a second's hesitation, Fletcher blurts out, "I've had better." Realizing what he just said, he looks horrified, but it's too late. Miranda furiously kicks him out of her apartment. The next morning, Fletcher can't stop thinking about his brutally honest remark. On his way to work, he gets into an elevator with an attractive brunette. He starts to make conversation, but instead of a polite compliment, he suddenly blurts out, "You've got big boobs." The woman, insulted, slaps him across the face. Stunned, Fletcher stumbles out of the elevator, baffled by his inability to control his words. As he walks toward his office, a homeless man approaches him, asking for spare change. Usually, Fletcher would dismiss him politely, but this time he launches into a harsh tirade. "I'm not giving you money because I know you'll just spend it on booze. I just want to get from my car to the office without being harassed by societal trash. And besides, I'm cheap." Mortified by his outburst, Fletcher turns and sprints into the courthouse. Entering the courtroom, still disoriented, Fletcher takes his seat next to Mrs. Cole. Across from them sit Dana, Richard Cole, and their team. Richard, clearly irritated, asks Dana how much she wants to settle and end the case. Before Dana can respond, Fletcher blurts out 50% of everything they have. Dana bursts into laughter, pointing out that this is impossible given the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of Mrs. Cole's infidelity. She asks Fletcher how he plans to defend such a claim. But when Fletcher tries to answer, he finds himself unable to form a lie. Instead, he stammers, makes odd noises, and pulls ridiculous faces. Annoyed by Fletcher's antics, Dana storms back to her table. Just then, Judge Marshall Stevens enters the courtroom, greeting the lawyers and asking how they are. Fletcher, unable to filter himself, responds, "I had bad sex last night." Realizing he's speaking nothing but the truth, Fletcher panics and requests a continuance. Judge Stevens asks for a valid reason, and Fletcher, flailing, admits, "I can't lie. That's my only reason." The judge denies the request and asks if the parties can reach an agreement. Dana informs him that Richard offered Samantha $2.4 million, but she refused. Hearing this, Fletcher eagerly tries to push Samantha to accept the offer, desperate to end the case quickly. However, Samantha refuses, reminding him that he convinced her she's the victim and has every right to fight for justice. With no resolution, the judge schedules the hearing for 1:30 p.m. Grabbing his files, Fletcher rushes out of the courtroom. Back at his office, Fletcher encounters his colleagues and, to his horror, speaks unfiltered thoughts to each of them. Embarrassed, he darts into his office and grabs a blue pen. Determined to prove he can still lie, he tries to declare the pen is red. But every attempt fails. His mouth betrays him, saying blue, and his hand writes the correct color on paper, seemingly against his will. Hearing the commotion, his assistant Greta enters and asks if everything is okay. Fletcher's erratic behavior alarms her, but she shifts the conversation to work matters, receiving only truthful but bizarre responses. Greta informs him that his ex-wife called and wants to know when he'll pick up Max. Suddenly remembering his promise to Max, Fletcher realizes he completely forgot to pick him up from school. He calls Audrey to apologize and tells her he can't make it because he's tied up in court. Despite his explanation, Fletcher shocks himself by admitting how much he genuinely wants to see Max. He tries to assure Audrey he's being completely truthful this time, unlike before when he missed Max's birthday party to sleep with Miranda, a move he only made in hopes of advancing his career. Furious, Audrey hangs up on him. After dropping Max off at school, Audrey tells him that his dad won't be able to pick him up and that she'll come for him instead. Max gets upset and says his wish didn't come true. He wished that for just one day his dad wouldn't lie. Seeing how hurt her son is, Audrey decides to have an important talk with him. Later, on her way home, Audrey gets another call from Fletcher. He wants to explain everything, but she cuts him off, telling him she and Jerry are moving to Boston. Jerry proposed, and she accepted. They're going to look at houses this weekend. Fletcher panics. If they leave, he won't be able to see Max. When he finds out Audrey is home, he begs her to stay put until he gets there. Hanging up the phone, he bolts out of his office, covering his ears to block out any distractions. He speeds home, breaking traffic rules and narrowly avoiding an accident when he runs a red light. A cop pulls him over. Without hesitation, Fletcher confesses to every violation he just committed and even to a bunch of unpaid parking tickets. Fletcher arrives at Audrey's house by taxi, only to find her at the door, ready to leave. She's furious for believing him again, only to be lied to once more. Fletcher tries to explain, and that's when she notices the taxi. Later, at the impound lot, Audrey pays Fletcher's fine and he retrieves his car. As she's about to leave for her class, Fletcher stops her. He questions whether she's really going to marry Jerry. After all, Jerry is nothing like him. He also argues that it's unfair for her to take Max away. Frustrated, Audrey reminds him about Max's birthday and how upset he was when his dad let him down yet again. Fletcher finally admits both to her and himself that he's been a terrible father. Realizing this, he suggests coming over after court to spend time with Max and discuss everything. But Audrey refuses. They're leaving tonight. Desperate, Fletcher begs for one last chance to fix things. She reluctantly agrees, but makes him promise to be there by 6. Before leaving, Audrey tells him what Max's wish was as she drives off. Fletcher finally realizes what's been going on and who's responsible. Fletcher heads to Max's school and asks to take him out of class. Outside, he tells Max that his wish came true. Max is thrilled that his dad can't lie and bombards him with questions like, "Can you go blind from watching too much TV? And is it dangerous to make funny faces for too long?" Fletcher then asks Max to take his wish back, explaining that adults sometimes need to lie. For example, when Max's mom was pregnant, she gained a lot of weight, but he always told her she looked amazing to avoid upsetting her. After some convincing, Max agrees. Fletcher pulls out a cake, lights a candle, and Max makes a new wish before blowing it out. But nothing changes. When Fletcher tells him this, Max responds that yesterday he made his wish with all his heart, but today he didn't really mean it. Fletcher urges him to try again, but Max says he doesn't want to lie anymore. Even though all adults lie, his dad's lies hurt the most. As Max's teacher comes to take him back to class, he tells Fletcher he's moving to Boston with his mom. Fletcher replies that nothing is set in stone and promises to see him tonight. Returning to his office, Fletcher walks gloomily to his desk. Sensing his mood, Greta follows him in. Inside, Fletcher confesses that his son hates him. He explains Max's wish that he couldn't lie for a whole day and how it came true. When Greta looks skeptical, Fletcher challenges her to ask him something he might normally lie about. Greta recalls the time Fletcher refused her a raise, claiming the firm didn't have the budget and he wasn't allowed to pay her out of his own pocket. Fletcher hesitates, knowing the truth will damage their relationship, but he's unable to resist the compulsion. Finally, he admits that he lied back then. Standing outside the door, Miranda overhears the entire conversation and grins maliciously. Angry, Greta quits on the spot and begins packing her things. Fletcher pleads with her to stay while simultaneously calling the judge to request a delay in the hearing. The judge refuses and Greta leaves anyway. Desperate, Fletcher chases after her but runs into Miranda, armed with the truth. Miranda drags Fletcher to a partners meeting, hoping to humiliate him. Inside the meeting, Fletcher, compelled to speak the truth, bluntly tells each partner what he thinks of them. But instead of taking offense, they laugh, thinking it's a joke. Miranda, blindsided by the reaction, sits silently as the others enjoy Fletcher's brutal honesty. By the time Fletcher arrives at the courtroom for his hearing, he's scrambling for ways to delay the proceedings, but finds no immediate solutions. Dana presents evidence of Mrs. Cole's infidelity, escalating the case. Nervous, Fletcher downs a large glass of water and suddenly asks for a bathroom break. The judge agrees, and Fletcher sprints out. In the restroom, a desperate idea strikes him. He starts beating himself up, faking an attack. When security finds him, they escort him back to the courtroom. Playing along, Judge Stevens suggests rescheduling the hearing, but asks Fletcher if he's truly unable to proceed. Unable to lie, Fletcher reluctantly admits he can continue. Impressed by his apparent perseverance, the judge grants another short recess. Dejected and exhausted, Fletcher slumps on the courthouse steps. Suddenly, his phone rings. Startled by the sound, he answers to hear Max's voice. His son excitedly talks about their evening plans and asks if the neighbor kids can join their game. Before Fletcher can respond, Samantha and her lover appear, approaching them. Fletcher realizes that not only can he not lie, but he also cannot even ask questions if he knows the answer would lead to a falsehood. Back in the courtroom, Fletcher is supposed to ask his witness, Kenneth Fox, a few questions, but instead he forces Kenneth to admit that he did indeed sleep with Samantha. Everyone in the room is shocked by what the lawyer is doing, and Mrs. Cole is furious. She doesn't care that Fletcher is suddenly conscience-stricken. She's determined not to be left alone at 31 without money. Hearing her age, Fletcher quickly grabs the papers and finally finds a way out of the situation. It turns out that when the marriage contract was signed, Samantha was only 17 years old. And under state law, marriage contracts can only be made with parental consent. She lied about her age, adding an extra year, which makes the contract invalid and all property must be divided equally. Mr. Allen, who is present at the hearing, is thrilled by how Fletcher managed to win the case. Fletcher breathes a sigh of relief. He won without lying. But Mrs. Cole strikes back. She decides to contest the joint custody as it would bring her even more money. Fletcher realizes that he's dealing with a mercenary woman who only cares about money. Seeing how she treats the children, practically dragging them away from their father, he understands the mistake he made. Mr. Allen approaches him, congratulates him on the victory, and informs him that Fletcher is now a partner in the firm. Wanting to make up for his wrongdoings, Fletcher turns to the judge and tries to fix things, but Stevens is adamant and orders Fletcher's arrest for contempt of court. The bailiffs drag him away and throw him in jail. As he's being escorted through the hallways in custody, Fletcher demands to make a phone call. Once allowed, he calls Audrey and asks her to post bail. However, she refuses to listen, no longer believing her ex-husband. She tells him they have a flight to catch and hangs up. Sometime later, Greta arrives to help him out. She's heard about his trouble and has posted bail. Freed, Fletcher rushes to the airport to stop Audrey and Max passing a homeless man. He happily gives him all the money he has. At the airport, Audrey and Max meet Jerry. Jerry tries to imitate the boy's father, but Max doesn't react. At that moment, the boarding announcement for their flight is made. Fletcher arrives at the airport just as the boarding is completed. He learns from a local worker that boarding for the Boston flight is already closed. Desperate, he climbs onto the baggage conveyor and sneaks in with the luggage. Meanwhile, Audrey is nervously asking the stewardess for a drink. Fletcher, now inside the terminal, notices that the plane is already taking off. In a panic, he steals a mobile staircase and chases down the plane, peering into each window. He calls out for Max and finally spots him. Determined to get his son back, he throws his shoe into the cockpit. The pilots, noticing someone on the runway, stop the plane. Fletcher is overjoyed, but just then, he notices a fence ahead and crashes into it at full speed, flying over it. He lands on luggage carts. Sometime later, Fletcher is dug out from under a pile of suitcases and loaded onto a stretcher, both of his legs broken. Audrey, running over to him, asks him to explain all the madness. In response, Fletcher confesses to Max that he loves him deeply and wants to be the best father he can be. Although his wish no longer works, he speaks nothing but the truth and promises never to hurt him again. Touched by his words, Audrey decides to stay and not separate her son from his father. A year later, Fletcher and Audrey celebrate Max's birthday together. The boy makes a wish, blows out the candles on his cake, and the room goes dark. When the lights come back on, Max sees his parents kissing. Fletcher asks his son if he wished for them to be together again, but Max denies it, saying he wished for new rollerblades. Smiling, Audrey suggests that Fletcher cut the cake. He agrees, but suddenly his hand transforms into a paw. Max's favorite game begins, and he happily chases Max and Audrey around the house. So that's it. If you enjoyed this movie, share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to check out the recommended movie on your screen right now. Watch it and join Mahi's movie recaps.